Hey friends, what's up? This is Metro, and today we're gonna go over my all new updated Wraith build. It's currently the most popular build in the game, which I'm super grateful for. Not that that means much, but I'm glad a lot of people are enjoying the build. And a lot of people came to me and asked me, when should you sell a certain item? When should you buy a certain item? So today I'll go over every single item, explain the purpose of the item, explain when to sell, and I'll try to give you as many examples as possible to make it easier for you to understand on how the build actually works. And we'll get right into it. If I'm yapping too much, tell me to shut up in the comments. But yeah, let's go. This is on the last patch. The meta really didn't change much. Spirit is still king in general, but I think the reason this build is performing so well is one very specific reason. Everyone is countering spirit damage. Not enough people counter gun damage in this game right now. But let's get right into it, okay? So we start off with the basic magazine. Literally just got buffed, gets like 2% more ammo. Super solid item. And monster rounds. Okay, in my second damage slot, I can run other items like close quarters or like headshot booster, but the reason I found monster rounds work so well in lane now with the current meta is towers got buffed, right? Towers are tankier, they deal more damage to you. So this item allows you to put more pressure on the tower early, win the lane early, put more pressure on your opponents, and also allows you to, in case you're about to tower dive, maybe stay alive a bit longer, because the tower also does more damage to you now and it's harder to get. So monster rounds I think are meta, they're insane. You should try them out. But the most important part about Wraith on lane, and the one thing I want you to take away from this video, if you haven't played Wraith a lot or if you don't understand Wraith, in lane, the only way to win your lane is cards, okay? Cards are insane. It doesn't matter if you go into a spirit build after or if you go into a gun build, you need to run cards in lane. And the most important item for this is extra charge. You will have this item from start of the game to finish. It's usually the first item I buy or the second item, and it's usually the last item I would ever sell, last 500 item I would ever sell, because it just gives you an extra card, okay? And while this is a gun build slash hybrid build, this is a must-have, okay? And then I go into Mystic Burst and extra spirit. This allows me these three items alone, which I rush before anything else here lane-wise, if I'm ahead. Otherwise I get extra regen or restorative shot if I need health. The reason being is they just allow me to throw out cards, bonus damage with Mystic Burst. I just never keep on shooting, recharge cards, and harass the enemy over and over, okay? There is a different playstyle in lane on Wraith that goes into Infuser, or you could even, if you want, add Infuser into this. But the reason we're not running more than 3 spirit items is we're later on gonna go down to Quicksilver Reload and Bullet Resist, okay? And we don't want to sell too many items early. So 3 is the maximum I could justify. Extra charge is a must, and then it comes down to your playstyle, okay? So there's 2 different playstyles in lane. One is saving up cards and then going for a massive burst if the enemy overcommits on you. And for that, Infuser is probably better, because Infuser you pop and for 6 seconds you deal an insane amount of damage and you get the lifesteal, right? But if you're just gonna throw out cards, like every time you see an opportunity, just to keep constant pressure on the enemy, which is what I like to do, right? I go for extra spirit instead. And the reason I go for extra spirit is it is 14 free spirit power, and ammo scav just got nerfed. It's still a really good item, but ammo scav, to have the 20 extra spirit active, you now need 20 stacks, which means you need to last it 20 souls, which is very hard to do in lane. And if you die, you have to redo that entire thing over and over. So I think ammo scav is now balanced. It's still buyable, okay? And then we go into extra stamina. I think this item is really broken. It literally just got buffed even more. It now gives 16% stamina recovery. And this is basically just an item to allow you to get around the map faster for 500, but not only that, it also allows you to get into the fight easier and out of the fight easier, right? This saves me a lot of the time where I would have no jump dash left and I end up having a jump dash because of extra stamina. I think this item is insane. And we don't really have to sell this because we're not really going for a lot of life items later on in the game, but we'll get into that. And then at the very end of the laning stage, once we have all of these items here, I go for sprint boots, another item that allows me to move around the map faster. But this is not as important as extra stamina in my opinion. And again, extra regen and restorative shot are situational. I would recommend you buy extra regen first. In case you take a lot of damage, it is also a really good item. So I tend to buy this 50% of the time. And if you're really hurt and the enemy is really putting a lot of pressure onto you, I like going extra regen and restorative shot. Some people do like healing right, but I don't like it as much anymore. It now takes 19 seconds for the full duration. It's still a great option, don't get me wrong, but I like being active on lane and just staying in the lane, sustaining, right, and getting more and more cards. And then we go into mid game. If you compare this build to my old build, by the way, that I made a video about like 2 or 3 weeks ago, the principle is still the exact same, okay? And the principle is, after laning stage, you get Fleetfoot. The main reason we get Fleetfoot, unironically the best item in the game for Wraith, in my opinion, it removes the movement penalty while you shoot, okay? Which means you can fight better and you can farm better because you constantly keep on moving at the same speed or even faster, and you also farm faster by just running around faster and getting extra temporary ammo if you need it, okay? So Fleetfoot is insane. And then I usually go into Quicksilver reload on my cards, okay? This is a gun build, so in the farming cycle I shoot my gun empty and then I throw a card, okay? I rarely throw multiple cards early to kill a camp, okay? Like, usually you want to throw it to reload. The reason we don't put this on the 3 is the 3 has a very long cooldown, and even in fights, sometimes you want to pop the 3 really early, full auto, right? And if you want to pop it really early, then Quicksilver reload goes to waste. Now you could say the same thing applies to cards in fights, right? Like sometimes you want to initiate the fight with cards, but not really, because this is a gun build. First and foremost, most of our damage comes from our gun, so we can very easily start off the fight by just shooting and then throwing the cards like, you know, like 3-4 seconds down the line and still get an almost full reload, okay? And then we go to our main item. Tesla bullets got buffed, okay? They are doing more damage based on your spirit now, okay? What that means is the more spirit you have, the more lightning damage you will do, shock damage. It's not a massive buff, and you definitely don't want to scale into like a lot of spirit just to have this active, but this item is a must pick in this build, and I'll explain to you the reason why, okay? This is gonna increase our farming speed by like an insane amount. It's gonna allow us to clear tier 3 camps really early. It's gonna allow us to insta-clear waves or clear waves really fast, and tier 2 camps are a joke with Tesla. But also, it will apply instant spirit damage to enemies in team fights and AOE spirit damage. And the reason this is important is later on with Bullet Shredder Resist, it will also instantly apply the bullet resist, the minus bullet resist that Bullet Shredder Resist does, right? Yes, you can also use cards or your full auto to proc this, but a lot of the time you don't want to start out doing that. And again, this hits multiple enemies. So if there's a team fight, it will bounce to multiple people and they will all receive that debuff, okay? And if you later down the line decide to go Mystic Slow, it also means a Mystic Slow applies to every single opponent, not only the one you're hitting, as long as they get hit by the Tesla bounce, okay? So this item is insane. And then we go into Combat Barrier, and Combat Barrier is now even better in this build, okay? The reason I run this is mostly because of the extra gun damage it gives us, okay? It's a slot filler for a green slot, but as long as we have a bullet shield, we gain weapon damage 22% and 6% fire rate. And the latest change that we had is creep camps and creeps and neutral camps do not take away your bullet armor anymore. So as long as you are not in a fight, this will always be active now, okay? Which means you can go from creep camp to lane, and you will always have the 22% extra damage and the fire rate. And then it's gonna save you with a massive bullet shield in the fights, right? So it's just like the best overall defensive item, I would say, that you can run on a gun wraith right now, in my opinion. So this is insane. And then we go into Bullet Lifesteal. Self-explanatory, right? More bonus health, and it's gonna allow you to sustain longer. You don't have to go to back to base to heal ever, because you're just gonna full heal from creeps. And obviously it's really, really good in fights, right? Because we're gonna dish out a lot of damage later on. Up until this point, I would say you can follow this 1-to-1 from left to right, you know? I know I said I use mystic items early. Actually, let me fix this right now. Once you get in game, you will see this. I will put these purple items early, just so you know. I usually buy those first, but again, you can go for whatever you like to make it easier for you. And then you have the choice here between Intensifying Magazine first or Hunter's Aura first, okay? And I'll explain to you which one is good in which situation. If you are mega farming and you're really free to farm anything, Intensifying Magazine is gonna increase your farming speed even more. And in team fights, if you're team fighting a lot, this is also going to be the better item early on, because it's going to ramp up your damage. Unless you are the one being focused, it's going to ramp up your damage massively, okay? So this is where you go for intensifying magazine. Now, if you find that you in the game go into more 1v1 situations, if you find a lot of people are trying to gank you, or you're ganking a lot of people at this point in the game, Hunter's Aura is better. This item basically guarantees that in a 1v1 scenario, nobody will ever kill you. It is ridiculous how much damage this adds to your build, okay? It triples the bullet resist and the fire rate slow in a 1v1. So what happens is, if you are anywhere close to the enemy's net worth and they go for a 1v1 with you, you lift them and they die before they hit the ground every single time, okay? And this is also insane in team fights, because it just applies that fire rate slow and that bullet resist to everyone. And it's gonna make you more survivable with the 150 extra HP. And this is the main new addition to this build that I found out works really well. Before that, the build looked about the same here, but Hunter's Aura was just removed, and then I would go straight into Lucky Shot or Inhibitor or Vampiric Burst. But I found out that this just lets me scale harder. I guess this is where we go into what to sell, okay? Because at this point, you're definitely gonna start selling. So up until this point, if you buy normally, you will end up needing a flex slot for Intensifying Magazine. If at this point, or Hunter's Aura. If at this point you don't have a flex slot, you can get rid of monster rounds. That's the first thing I would do. Because like, yes, they helped you in lane, right? The laning stage is over at this point, and the Intensifying Magazine is gonna help you farm creeps faster. And then you are going into Bullet Shredder Resist, and this is usually the first item where you have to start selling, okay? And I just sell extra Spirit. Again, you never wanna sell extra charge because you get extra cards, and the Mystic Burst just adds more damage per card than extra Spirit usually, because you get that bonus damage. And you have that 6% weapon damage, right? So at this point, at Bullet Shredder Resist, unless you have 2 flex slots open, I sell extra Spirit, okay? And then at that point, you really should have a flex slot, right? Like, if at that point you don't have a flex slot, you probably already lost the game. So let's assume at this point you're still kind of behind, or even, but you only have 1 flex slot, right? So we get to Hunter's Aura. Enduring Speed is an upgrade instantly, so you don't need a slot for this. And then you can start thinking about which tier 4 item to go for first, okay? And there is multiple options here that make sense depending on what you run. Lucky Shot is the easiest option here, right? It just adds flat out damage and slows the enemy down, making you able to deal more damage with the bonus bullet proc that procs on every 3rd shot. That being said, you can also go Inhibitor instead. Inhibitor is gonna make you tankier. It kinda does the same thing. It will slow down the enemy movement, but it will also reduce the enemy damage they deal, okay? So if you hit them and they shoot you, they will deal significantly less damage to you. So this is the safer or more defensive option. And this is also probably the better option in most cases in team fights, where you wanna, you know, like sit in the back and help your team out and just reduce the damage of the enemies. What I tend to go first a lot of the time though is doing Vampiric Burst instead. This item also got buffed. It is insane. 100% lifesteal and 40% fire rate when you pop this. It makes you faster, move speed in general, gives you health and damage. Insane item on Wraith. Some people ask me about Shadow Weave, but I think this item is more so for a card build and not a gun build. The main buff it gives you now after coming out of Invis is the 55 Spirit Power. And card Wraith got nerfed. I'm not saying it's unplayable, but it's definitely a bit weaker. And probably on the same strength as Weapon Wraith or Gun Wraith right now. So if you're running card, you can run this, but I just don't see this item being valuable over Vampiric in a lot of situations. If you are the initiator and you feel like the Invis helps you, you can still go for this. I don't like it personally, but it's not a bad choice, okay? Which brings me to the main thing with this build. People right now buy Spirit Armor. All of them, right? Everyone else deals Spirit damage. The only people in this game that really build gun nowadays are Haze, because Haze is always gun because of how her character functions. Some Vindictas do, and Wraith players. Everyone else is kinda Spirit damage meta right now, right? If you look at it, like 7 Spirit damage, Inferno Spirit damage. So what ends up happening in a lot of the games I play is everyone has a lot of Spirit resist, but not a lot of gun resist. Now there are obviously counters to gun, right? One is Return Fire and the other one is Metal Skin, which just makes you not be able to deal damage to them for 3.5 seconds. But that's also why I think Vampiric Burst is so good. Because when you pop Vampiric Burst and they proc Return Fire, you can just shoot through it and they will still die. That's how much damage you do. And if you combine Hunter's Aura and Bullet Shredder Resist, suddenly the enemy you're fighting has like an insanely low percentage of bullet resist. Sometimes it's negative, and this does work. You can have negative resist in this game, and because not a lot of people buy bullet resist anymore, this works insanely well, okay? So that's the main reason I'm running Hunter's Aura right now. People just don't expect it, and I think it's just a solid tool in most games. And I've run this build for like 3 days now, and I'm winning way more with it than without Hunter's Aura. So I really think you should give this item into consideration. If you don't want to run it, you can skip it and go straight for like a T4 item if you're very farmed. But this works really well. I do think the meta is gonna evolve into splitting spirit damage and gun damage on the same team, right? If the entire team only runs spirit damage, everyone else can just count it as spirit damage. But if you have like 1 or 2 people like a Wraith that have a gun and they're really farmed, then suddenly the entire enemy team has to buy bullet armor, right? Improved bullet armor, or metal skin, or return fire, which actually makes you win in the long run, right? It does suck if they proc metal skin properly. You have to disengage, you have to like play kind of safe until it's over, but return fire doesn't really bother us because we have so much bullet lifesteal at this point. We have bullet lifesteal, we have Vampiric. Sometimes you can go for Leech as well, which got buffed if you want that instead. It's an easier option, I guess, compared to Vampiric, even though I do think Vampiric is better in most cases. But yeah, you have a lot of options. If you get to the point where you have, where you buy Vampiric Burst, you should have 2 flex slots. Assuming you don't have 2 flex slots, right? Somehow you can still end up selling basic magazine. At that point, your magazine should be so big that it wouldn't matter anyways. But the beauty about this build, in my opinion, is how easy it is to like go from item to item, and you really almost never have to sell stuff. Now, if you're going for a defensive item and you really like, let's say the enemy haze is farmed and you need metal skin or return fire or spirit armor, what I end up selling here, if I don't have flex slots, is at that point I end up selling the extra stamina, right? At that point, farming time is kind of over and it's really like mid to late game teamfight territory, and at that point I sell it. And yeah, this build works beautifully at this point. Even if you're behind, even if you don't have the last 2 flex slots, the next item you can always sell basic magazine for. Which brings me to the next item, I guess. Unstoppable. If the enemy has a lot of stun and shuts you down, you proc this item and they can't stop you, okay? This is almost a must-have against certain combos like a 7 on the other team that always goes for you and stuns you. Mo and Krill, right? Dynamo. If you proc this at the right time, this is a hard carry item. Insanely good. Alternatively, or additionally, you can go Colossus. If you kind of need to be more in the front line, if your team doesn't have a tank, or if your team is not very farmed compared to you, you can get this item. It makes you insanely survivable, right? 40% bullet resist, 40% spirit resist, and it slows down everyone in your aura. And then they have to run away from you. And at that point, you're so deep in the late game, you go for Soul Rebirth. Now, I am experimenting with Mystic Slow, and I haven't played enough games with Mystic Slow to tell you if this is really justifiable, okay? It does really only give you the effect, but the effect is insane. And it works insanely well with Tesla bullets, right? So 30% movement slow and 40% fire rate slow on anyone that is being affected by your gun damage, which also procs Tesla, right? So it's like a budget ricochet, right? You're not running ricochet, but you're applying spirit damage to everyone, which means everyone gets affected by by Mystic Slow. Yeah, if you would buy this, you would buy it, I guess, over Lucky Shot or Inhibitor here, okay? And the reason being is they kind of do similar things, okay? The movement slow is the same on Lucky Shot and Mystic Slow, and almost the same as Inhibitor, also 25% movement slow. This one is a more, well, I don't want to say defensive option, but a more team fight oriented option, because again, it works with the Tesla AOE and it applies fire rate instead of damage penalty, right? So it's kind of similar to Inhibitor in that sense, but it is AOE, whereas Inhibitor is not, okay? And that's the big deal, and it's cheaper, right? It's not going to give you the health, it's not going to give you the damage, but I think this item has insane potential in this build. Other options, Crippling Headshot. If the enemy is running a lot of resist, and they're really stacking resist, or you need to help out your team more because you're not dealing enough damage, this applies bullet resist and spirit resist for everyone on your team as long as you hit the enemy, which means in teamfights this is an insane item. I probably end up buying this almost as much as Lucky Shot. And Toxic Bullets, some people think it's a must. I don't think it is. I think I run this when there's at least 2 or 3 enemy heroes that have a lot of lifesteal. So it really depends on the situation. But I always buy this against Infernus. This is a must pick against Infernus. Because it just shuts him down, right? Infernus has probably the highest lifesteal in the game. Lifesteal did get nerfed this patch. It stacks less now, right? So if you buy multiple lifesteal items, like if you buy Leech, Vampiric, and Bullet lifesteal, it doesn't heal as much anymore as it used to. It's still a lot, but yeah. Must buy against Infernus. Otherwise, there's so many items you have that are like so good in the orange slots, right? That like I try to skip this. I try to skip it. And usually, in my opinion, having the extra like burst damage that Vampiric gives me, or something like Crippling Headshot, edges out Toxic Bullets, okay? So this is like really an item you only want to buy if you really must, in my opinion. Also got nerfed a tiny bit. But still the best item for Wraith if you need healing reduction on the enemy. Yeah, at this point, again, 2 flex slots, and then we can end up selling Combat Barrier later down the line, right? Like barriers, super late game, don't really do as much anymore. So if at that point you have improved Spirit Armor, which I buy a lot, this is probably the most used item I have in the defensive items as needed, because again, Spirit damage is king. Then I end up selling Combat Barrier for this, okay? So if you need Unstoppable and you still don't have a 3rd flex slot, at this point, you probably have it, and then you go for Soul Rebirth, right? You have 2 lives, or Colossus. Or if you wanna have more fun, you can go for Glass Cannon. This is a really risky pick. It's a really risky pick. I used to like this a lot, but this is a snowball item. I think by itself the effect is not that great. It makes you less tanky. HP is so good right now. It makes you less tanky. And it gives you a lot of weapon damage, don't get me wrong. But at this point, you're already being able to 1v1 anyone on the map. This already does insane damage without a single 6.2k item. But if you end up buying this, you need to get extra kills to make it worth it, right? You need those extra weapon stacks. So I don't think this is a great item on Wraith. Very situational. If you're super early ahead and you have like a lot of farm, you can buy this. Surge of Power. And now if you need more movement speed, you can put this on your cards. Your cards are gonna deal some more damage, but yeah. Ethereal Shift, still good option. It got nerfed. You can't cancel it early anymore. So this is like if the enemy has like a ton of debuffs on you at the same time, like you're getting bebop bombed and someone is stunning you, you pop this, you're fine for 3.5 seconds, right? You can't die, and hopefully the team catches up at that point, or you try to teleport out right after if you need like to stall, right? So I still think there's a great item, but it's not a must item anymore, must pick item anymore. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you have any questions, please ask them as well. And yeah, if you tried out the build, let me know how it went. A lot of people are really happy with it. For the playstyle of Wraith, how you play this, I do have a guide out on my main YouTube channel. I'll link it in the comments, I guess, if you're unsure on how to play this. But TLDR, you win the lane or go even at worst, because Wraith is an insane laner. You win the lane or you go even, and then once you ramp up to Tesla, you farm insanely fast, you suck the entire map dry, until you get Hunter's Aura, and then you can kill anyone in the game. That's it. Until next time, see you friends. Bye bye.